Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pop Corner episode 21. Can you do something for me?
What's that?
Can you hit a little rich flex for me? No. Today we've watched Indiana Jones
Just got back from the theater, actually.
and the Dial of Destiny.
Leading up to this, we have watched
Yeah, we watched 1, 2, and 4.
Screw a 3. 3's my least favorite number. Is 3 supposed to be the lucky one? Not here.
Yeah, no, we just realized we were getting low on release weeks, and we didn't want to miss this one for today. So
Yeah.
This is a non-spoilery review for, the movie. So we're going to keep it a little bit shorter. So on a normal thing, we'll go for about an hour. This is going to be about half an hour. So that being said, we just watched the movie. It's opening night, and should be going up on Friday unless something goes wrong with my internet or something. So yeah, Draven, what did you think about this movie?
We watched this movie. If you're here for the first time, just because this is the new movie.
Yeah, kind of recap your thoughts on the franchise.
So,
yeah.
I have never seen this franchise until as of recent for this podcast. We watched 1, 2, 4 in this one now. And I am a huge horror fanatic.
Horror fanatic, more like.
But I only really watch the horror genre of movies with the occasional comedy. So this whole franchise was new to me. I was going in fresh right from the get-go when you were showing me the first film.
Right.
And I have many thoughts on this film because it's not like this franchise as a whole, not this film. This franchise as a whole, because since it's not really in my comfort movie kind of zone, I don't really have that many positives or negative things to look at. But I will say that going into this, with it not being my type of movie, I thought I was going to hate it. Thought it was going to be terrible. Thought I was going to have a terrible, boring time. It wasn't that bad. Honestly, I'm coming around. It's all right. I think some are better than others, but I do think that overall this franchise has been pretty consistently good. But I do think that, especially the first and the second one, tone shift, crazy.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I have nostalgia for this franchise. Weirdly enough, the one we skipped, part of the reason why I was fine with skipping it at the time was because that's the one that I have the least nostalgia for.
Gotcha.
So, 1, 2, 4, watch them all the time. And quite frankly, I was thinking about it recently. I was like, you know what? I could probably get away with really only watching the first one ever again. I'd be okay with being like, okay, Indy 1, that's where it's at. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm still there. But
this one didn't change your mind?
Oh, I just meant, going back with the movies I'd seen, for a good bit. And so with this rewatch, I was really looking at these movies critically, which that doesn't change my overall enjoyment of them, but I was really interested to see how this one would land, because obviously there were a lot of negative, sentiment. There was at least a negative sentiment to the movie, if not straight up, this movie bombs.
I was going to say, before even watching this, all the reviews and stuff were kind of reporting that this movie wasn't the greatest.
Right.
And honestly, just to get a general basis out there, I think the hate comments are a little too much. I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to go out here and watch this and probably be like, this is the best indie movie of all time.
This is not a hill I'm going to die on, but this is a movie. I'm not going to defend this movie till the end of time, but I do think it's, at least with the earlier critic response, I think it got a little overhated.
Yeah,
at least,
I agree.
Unless people were only circulating the negative ones and I didn't see the positive ones. That could be. I don't know. Probably not, though.
Well, let's dig into this.
Yes. So
movie without giving any spoilers. That's the plan here.
Non-spoiler. This is coming. I want to say this is the first of all of the Indiana Jones movies not directed by Steven Spielberg.
I saw his name in the credits though.
Yeah,
he probably had some.
He was still on as executive producer, but
Gotcha.
This was from James Mangold, who otherwise he did Logan for Wolverine. Was a movie he did recently.
Okay.
I'm sure there's something else that I'm not thinking of, but that's something of a more recent tone. But this movie is 2.5 hours long.
It was so long.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But I feel like that's something. I mean, obviously this is the longest one in the franchise, but I feel like as an indie fan, these movies are basically 2 hours on the dot every time anyway.
Yes.
So it's not really that much more of a reach. And I guess you could say, well, this is the last adventure. We're wrapping up his entire arc, his entire story. That extra 30 minutes could be justified. Do you think it's justified?
I think in our brief conversation on our way here, I think the best way to sum it up would to say that the pacing of this movie is actually pretty good. Like the scenes, they flow, they move well. Nothing ever feels too slow. Nothing feels too quick and jaunted. But it just feels like there's too much. I don't know how and where or why. This isn't a movie where I feel like there's anything that was unnecessary.
Yeah, that's something that we did with our previous movies of the franchise. Yes. Is we could pick out specific scenes that's like, this didn't need to be here. There's no point. This movie, all the scenes felt necessary.
Yeah.
But like it felt too long and dragged out in certain points.
Right. I definitely agree with that.
But it's hard to be like, oh, cut this scene. It's not necessary, because usually all the scenes had something that was worthwhile.
They were important.
Yeah.
Major rewrites would need to occur to make this movie shorter.
It's not as easy as just pick a scene, cut it, remove it. You're good.
Right.
Like the other ones could.
But specifically in the tone of being a send-off to Indy, is that extra time justified as a send-off? Yes and no.
Okay.
Because I feel like the whole story itself is a big send-off to Indy in a way. I mean, it's very self-aware of the fact that it's like, hey, we're dragging out like 80-year-old Harrison Ford out here and doing all this and that. And like, so I'm like, yeah, that's great. Cool. Awesome. I get horror flashbacks every time. I've got straight up PTSD whenever I see Harrison Ford on a plane. I'm just like, he's going to crash that thing.
Yep.
Just like real life.
Well, if you are a fan of running or driving, this movie's for you.
Yes.
Just so you know.
Yes.
Indy, of course, in the formula, has a lot of chase scenes, right? Like, it's just part of the Indy formula.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie said, let's just take a lot of that fight formula, take it away, and put it more into the chase formula.
I think this movie probably has more vehicle action in it than Fast and Furious.
It really does.
Has become.
And you can take that. I don't know if you think that's a positive or a negative, but for me, that is something in this movie that I didn't like. I love me some chase scenes, don't get me wrong, but I felt like there was too many in this film and not enough fight scenes. My favorite part of this franchise is the fight scenes and the set pieces that they put up together. And there's a few good ones here. Like, don't get me wrong, they didn't completely scrap the fight scenes. Yeah. But I do think it's very, very minimum. It's like,
I thought, how do I want to say this? I thought that it was very interesting, the pivot from, Indy being this super, I don't know, like intense fighter. Maybe not. He's
the Chad.
Every movie, Indy gets his ass kicked to some degree. That happens.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it's weird to think that, like, in this movie, there's not really a lot of fighting.
There really isn't.
And it's clearly because Harrison Ford's older.
He's old, yeah.
Like, that just is what it is. And, the movie pivots to put Indy on a level playing field. Everyone's on a level playing field when they're all in vehicles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was an interesting choice. I just feel like it really drags you down.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we're getting to, like, the third chase scene. And I'm just like, are we really doing this again?
Yeah.
And, like, thankfully, I want to say there were two gratuitous ones, like, where I was like, okay, we're going to go really all in on this, right? And then by the time the third one comes around, it's pretty short-lived. So it's just like, okay, great, it's fine. It's cool. So I don't think it was a terrible thing. It's understandable, but it's definitely true that some of the charm of the old Indy isn't here if you're looking at it from that lens.
Yeah.
So, in that way, it feels a little bit lesser.
I mean, one thing I wanted to, comment on, since there's, not a lot of fight scenes, there are scenes where Indy does put up fights. Some of them, he might put in some work. Some of them he might not. For example, this isn't a spoiler because I'm not going to tell you characters or anything, but Indy himself, he's older. There's a scene where he's going to fight this dude who's just way bigger, way stronger. And, he tries to, hit him, and he just kind of looks at him and just forces him down. He's like, nah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, a lot of pressure in on that to where it's, making Indy look old, weak.
Right.
But with that in mind, with these chase scenes and, certain knowledgeable things, he's still there. So like it's not like he's a worthless character. It's just his age is showing. He can't go out here just going whip, 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 dodge, whip, whip. He can't do that anymore.
That was, and not to completely pivot this conversation, but I feel like that's a pivot. I think that's a great, lead into the next point that I wanted to make, was that this movie does really lean into Indy being old, and not just from the sense of the fight scenes or something, but like, he's climbing or something, he's gonna make a comment, or just like that is, I think, the only way that you keep the charm of Indiana Jones, because in this movie, he's old, he's gruff, he's more like Harrison Ford.
Dude gets up by like loud neighbors. Man's out here just getting ready to beat some teenagers up for waking him up. He's definitely showing his old man side.
Yes,
he's getting up there.
So you pick your poison. Is this like the Indiana Jones you want? I thought it was very interesting seeing how different the character is after all this time.
Honestly, it's really interesting because the last one, Indy 4, that movie,
Crystal Skull.
Yeah, I felt like in that movie, the Crystal Skull movie, they were kind of already putting Indy to the side a bit with Mutt being a character. And I thought that in the fourth movie, Indy already kind of had a lot less involvement with the fight scenes to a degree compared to the first two.
Okay,
I never watched the third one.
Right.
But the first two, I felt like he was more involved, more like one-on-one with people. And I felt like in the fourth one, Mutt was kind of the pivotal person to start the fights, and
exception being in 4, the one Russian guy.
Yeah, I'm not saying he wasn't there at all.
Right.
I just thought that like it was already starting to show the like switcheroo of him being more, because like that car scene where he's driving, and like he's mainly just driving the whole time.
Yeah.
You get more of that version of Indy in this movie.
Yes.
So but with that, with talking about the fourth Indy movie, I want to tell you, there's a lot of people from what I've seen from the community that don't like the fourth movie.
Fourth movie, yes.
So if you already hate it, that's fine, cool. If you enjoy the fourth movie, let me tell you, this movie makes the fourth movie worthless.
In a lot of ways, yes.
In a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Like the fourth movie is basically just filler now at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. Very. There's a few setups that like are basically explained away in a couple of lines in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the nature of the beast. That movie was they resurrected the franchise with that movie to be okay. This is the send off, and now they're like doing it again.
And then now they're doing it again. So they have to like work around what they've made.
Right. When Harrison Ford's 90, he's like, "Okay, kid, one more time." I've seen things you wouldn't imagine.
I don't think we can, honestly, I don't think we can do another Indy movie with Indy. The way this one ends, I don't think we can really do that. And if they did, it'd be so tedious. I really don't think there is ever going to be another Indy movie, at least with him as the main role.
Right, yes. And, I think, how do I want to say this? So there's two things that I really want to talk about for positives, and then I have some nitpicks.
All right, let's hear them.
So, for positives, the overall story, I enjoyed it. Like the actual plot.
I agree.
I thought the motivations for a lot of the characters, which that's the other thing I want to talk about, is the characters themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I thought a lot of those, I thought it all fit really well. I thought cameos and callbacks to other movies were there.
They were there.
And they weren't so gratuitous that it was too much.
It wasn't annoying, but it was there for you to like notice, because the people that were in our theater, I'd just be sitting there watching, I'm like, oh, cool reference, and you'd like hear like a few people around us be like, oh man, from the first movie.
Yeah.
People were getting excited in our theater.
Right. It was interesting. And I have to say another thing, talking about opening night, I've seen a couple movies I've seen like 4 movies opening night this year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only 2 movies that were doing really, really well in the theater. That was Scream 6.
All I'm saying is the knife swipe. You know the scene I'm talking about. People were going wild.
Scream 6 had the theater pretty well done. And honestly, for Indiana Jones, I expected less.
Yeah, me too.
This was it wasn't a packed theater. There were seats, but That was pretty good. I mean, like, I think this movie is probably going to make some money.
Heck, even when we were walking out, I heard the one girl say, "We need to watch this again, like Wednesday or something."
Yeah,
like,
right.
they were jacked. So,
yeah, and I mean,
rightfully so. This movie isn't as bad as what the reviews are saying by any means.
And that's the part that gets me, is like, I'm just like, I don't understand. I mean, you have to find the fun with this sort of stuff. And, like, I mean, the fun's, it's still there. If nothing else, the intrigue of a first watch, and I think that's the biggest thing of a movie, is like, am I wanting to see what happens next, or am I wanting the credits to roll? And, like, as much as I was like, okay, this is starting to get a little long, I still wanted to see what happened. And I wasn't like, okay, let's see blank happen and just get it done with. Like, I still wanted to see it. So, and it was good. I liked it. So, yeah. But did you have anything as far as, like, the story or the plot goes that Eddie...
Well, something about the plot that I've talked about prior, I'm not sure... I'm not going to go super in detail because it is pretty important to the story. Okay. But I will say that this movie specifically is a lot different compared to the previous ones with the treasure. The treasure kind of sets up...
Yes.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
The treasure kind of sets up what's going to happen towards the end of the movie, which, granted, a lot of the older ones did do that, but they, like, kind of shadow drop them in there, or they're like little, like, under the rug scenes that would kind of be like nod towards this. Like, you know, there's some supernatural stuff with the first relic, or, you know, the alien in the fourth one.
Right.
You know, there's stuff there, but it's not fully confirmed as to what's going to happen. So at the end, you're like, whoa, that's interesting. At least for me, that's how it was. This movie, I knew how the end was going to, in a way. I didn't know how it was going to work, but I knew how the end was going to go.
Right.
If that makes sense, without spoiling, of course.
Yep. And I guess that is something, that is a really good point, and I agree. I think while I don't necessarily believe that what happened was the issue, like, it wasn't a letdown of...
No, it was definitely a good... I liked it.
I thought it was really cool. And there's going to be people who are like, oh, it's a spoiler to say there's a twist at the end. No, I really enjoyed how it went. I just wish I didn't have as much of an idea of what was going to happen by the time it did happen. Which I guess you could say is like, okay, it's set up well within the plot or whatever. And to some degree, I think the reasoning is it's a little more needs to be explained.
I think it does need to, because if you didn't plant those seeds early on, it would be out of nowhere, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
If what happened and we didn't know it until it was happening,
it would be like,
I would be like, what the fuck? Yeah,
I agree.
That would have been...
The seeds needed to be planted. I just wish... It's just a different approach to what I think was what was in the previous films. I think the approach of how the treasure and, like, what the treasure does and all that was kind of planted way early, and you kind of knew what was going to happen in a way. Right. Of course, that doesn't mean that's exactly how it goes. So if you go and watch it and you see, like, the first 5 minutes, you're like, oh, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
That's not exactly true. There's twists and turns, but it kind of leads you on a little bit too early, in my opinion.
That's fair. So final thing of major points before I get into potential nitpicks or negatives that are separate.
Lay it on me.
I want to talk about the characters.
Okay. Yes.
So, casting wise, we've got Phoebe Waller-Bridges as Helena, the goddaughter of Indiana Jones.
Good character.
Yeah, we've got in the movie, in the trailer, Sala is in it. That's, I would say, little more than a cameo, but just enough more to where they could put him in the trailer and it's justifiable. You've got Mads Mikkelsen as the villain. Who else we got? We got somebody else in there, probably. Antonio Banderas is not in the film as long as you'd think he is. That's pretty much the bigger cast. I mean, there's other characters. The supporting characters, like the smaller ones, I think they're all really well done. Actually,
well, this is one of the things that I also thought within this franchise that wasn't the best was the side characters.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I always forget her name.
Which one?
You know, his first.
Marion?
Yes, I always forget her name. She is the only supporting character, especially from the first film, that I liked. Yes. The rest of the supporting cast for all these films have been either okay, or they're just like, I don't care, you can die, I don't give a care. I think that this movie did the side characters and the villains very well. I think that they set all the characters up. Their arcs were really good. It wasn't too fast, wasn't too slow for pacing, and a lot of them were entertaining or funny. I think, and again, the villains are something I would really want to focus on, because in a lot of the indies movies, you only have the big bad guy, and then they have their like army.
You've got your one main henchman usually.
Yeah, this one had more henchmen, and they were entertaining.
And I'll be quite frank, I couldn't tell you their names, but I can look at them, I can say, okay, that's mustache guy.
Yeah.
That's tall brute guy.
Brute guy, yeah.
And then, and then believe you've got your main guy. Yeah, no. Truly, I loved it. I loved everything, specifically villains. Mads Mikkelsen, I thought he was really great in his role. I thought another thing that was really cool about that was that throughout the movie, you get a certain vibe about his motivations. It's pretty much set up in the trailers, and we all knew going in that these are former Nazis. That, like, obviously the war's over. This takes place late 60s.
Every other Indian. 1,
every
3,
other,
and 5.
Yeah.
Odd numbers. Nazis are odd.
I did not see that coming.
We're funny. Subscribe.
Yep, do it. Almost to 1,100. But what I thought was interesting about Mads Mikkelsen's character was that earlier on you get the vibe that he's into I don't want to say treasure, but the relic for one reason or the other, because it's almost like a prideful thing. But then, like, as the movie goes on, you get more of an insight into his motivations, and I don't know if, let me put it this way, when he's ready to suit up, if you get what I'm saying, you kind of get his true
intentions and
motives.
Yeah,
and like I think I thought it was like it was pretty. I don't want to say subtle.
It wasn't subtle, but it
wasn't subtle, but it was like, okay, like we're there.
Yeah.
We're going.
Well,
there.
for the first while, you do think he's just there just to collect the treasure, or
right?
something.
Right.
Like he's fascinated with it,
right?
But then, of course, he does have the motives because he knows of what this treasure kind of does or what it's supposed to do.
Yep.
So, unlike your first film where the bad Nazi guys didn't know what the treasure did, they're just like, they're like, Indy, you want to see what's in this like we do.
Just immeasurable power is all they know. They know from some scripture. They don't know what it does.
Something with the characters, too, that aren't related to the villains. It's more of the, like, side characters, and that's not Indy. Mm-hmm. There are certain scenes with different treasures and stuff that, like, they get, and some characters are like, yo, let's sell this for money.
Yeah.
But then Indy's, like, the bold man. He's like, nah, we got to put this in a museum.
Right.
Like, I like those scenes because it really shows, like, how old-fashioned he is, and he's like, not everything has a price.
Right.
You know, we need to save history and, you know.
Yeah,
I like those type of scenes back and forth between like the younger generation and his generation and like how he thinks.
I agree. And you get more of that, like the generational divide throughout the movie. Minor spoiler. Very beginning of the movie. Okay, I know we said no spoilers. This is super minor. He's teaching a class.
Yeah. You're going to say what I was saying?
And the class just doesn't pay
care.
attention.
Yep.
They don't care. Granted, the world events that may be happening in the movie, whatever. But, like, I just think it's so unique watching as pretty much each of these movies has gone on. Except for, there's a gap there, but it's fine.
But, like in all the other movies, when he goes to do the college class and he's teaching, all the kids are paying attention.
Yep.
They're like writing notes and they're like asking questions, or they're really entertained and like paying. They're in it to like see what's going on.
They're in it to win it.
But then these kids are just like,
yes, yeah, no. So yes, otherwise with characters, we've talked about the villains. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about kind of the juggling of the main cast otherwise, which would pretty much be Indy, Helena, and then eventually we get the the younger boy.
I think that the juggle, some people are going to hate it. I'm going to be real honest with you.
For the kid?
No, I'm going to talk about the which I think it's fine. I think that it worked very well. But I'm going to understand why people are going to hate it, because it does kind of sideline Indy in a way, especially from what we talked about earlier, like fight scenes and stuff. He's kind of just put to the side as these other characters are involved more with the fight scenes and all that kind of stuff. And people were going to see that and be like, Indy's being put to the side. We don't like that. He's our main character.
Right.
But to an extent, he still is the main character, of course, here. But with the things that they do sideline him in, they might see that as a whole of Indy being put to this, pushed to the curve, and these other characters getting the spotlight, like passing the torch kind of thing.
Yeah, there was a point in this movie where I felt that, like it was like a passing of the torch, but I think it does reel it back to a point where it's not like, okay, this is the...
At the end of the movie, with the way it ends, to me, I'm like, this is still an Indy movie.
Yes. There's a point in the movie, how do I describe this, where Helena and Indy are having a conversation, and basically they're kind of, going back and forth, being kind of witty, and she kind of shows him up. And she's like, oh, well, I can do this, by myself. I can do this.
Yeah, you're talking about like when they're sitting in the cart or something, and then they're talking about like, oh, you need me because I can do this. And she's like, I've been doing this forever.
Yeah, I don't need you.
I've been doing this since I was 11.
And then, like he ends up having to save her at some point. And then she's like, okay, well, he knows his stuff. He knows what he's done.
I think that's where it really came in.
I think that's where it still shines as an Indy movie, where it's like, I think that is the message of this movie in a lot of ways. Is that like it's the last adventure. It's like learning to let go, but it's also on multifacets. Each of those characters has that, and that's where the heroes and the villains differ, and that's the way with every Indy movie. And honestly, I think that is the theme. Every Indy movie is like, the first movie, like, all right, I know not to tempt fate. I don't need to open the Ark of the Covenant. The Nazis did.
And then they perished.
Right. Or the second movie, never mind. I've instantly lost my train of thought there. I mean, I know not to control a cult. Yeah.
There's something in this movie, too, that I've said since, like, the first one. And I guess, in a way, it makes up for it later in conversations in this movie.
Okay.
But there's always... Indy always, like, hears or sees about these rumors. Like, oh, the first movie, the supernatural thing that is, like, related to this relic. The fourth one being aliens. And he's like, oh, I don't believe in that. It's just, scriptures or something.
Okay.
And then in this one, I felt like it was still kind of there where he doesn't believe in what is being said about the relic and what it can do. And he's like, it can't do this. You're crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, you've seen so many previous things happen that you can't explain. At some point, you got to be like, at least skeptical. Like, maybe this stuff might be true. I think later, I feel like this movie contradicts with that, because I feel at one point he is like that, where he's like, nah, it can't be real.
Yeah.
But then at another point, he goes, I've seen some things. And he was saying that he doesn't believe in like magic or something, but he is skeptical. And I'm like, it kind of contradicted itself, but I'm glad that we got that in the later.
Oh, I think there was a difference in setting when he said those things. On one hand, it's the beginning of the adventure, and nothing is too serious yet. And then the other time he says it is mid-adventure.
It was mid.
When he's like, he's kind of like, cards out on the table, like, okay, shit can go down.
Yeah.
But, I think at one point it was the act of trying to avoid. So, like, to me, I'm kind of doing a little bit of, I'm jumping through hoops for it here a little bit. No, but that's the way I would see it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right anyway. Like, I think that's how you should take it. It's just been something that's been on my mind since the first movie. I'm like, okay, after the first movie, you got to be at least skeptical about these things and be like, okay, maybe science isn't always correct here. Maybe there are some supernatural things or whatever related to these relics and treasures.
Right.
Because after seeing like 4 different things, you gotta kind of be like, okay, maybe. But then again, there have been probably tons of treasures he's done and secured that didn't have that attachment to it. So I guess I can see it both ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the less eventful missions are the ones that we don't see in the movies. So
I do want to say they did call, it's not a spoiler, they did call him a grave robber again, and I love that.
You like that?
Yeah, he's been called that in like every movie. I was wondering if they were going to say it again.
Yeah, I actually saw people complaining about that on Twitter.
Really?
Where I was just like, I forget what it was like. But somebody was like, oh, of course they're going to have this young woman come in and show up Indy and then just call him a grave robber.
Let me guess. Woke, go broke.
Yeah, go woke, go broke crowd.
That's every movie, every game, everything.
Had to have been who it was. There was a woman in this, and you'd think they're gay. They didn't want to see women.
I guess.
Well, anyway, that was a thing. I was just like, you know what? They kind of already say that in every movie. It's kind of like they're deterrent. Like, hey, yeah, we're doing this, but we said it, so it's fine.
Are you scared of snakes? Because Indy's still scared of them. We learned that.
Yeah, I think that is so funny. And it's a good twist, so it's cool. But with that being said, I think that brings up a really cool point, and I think that's probably the final point of discussion.
Let's hear this point. All right, yeah. We can do final verdicts. Yeah. We can give you what we think on a general basis of the movie.
What do you think? How do you think this movie looks visually? Like visuals of this movie, yeah.
I thought it looked great.
Yeah, visuals and sound are like the last thing I wanted to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a theater experience, so watching it from home...
Sound is way better.
Sound is always just peak in a theater. So, as a person who might watch it later on in their own home on a TV, I can't really say with 100% confidence that the audio is going to be top-notch. But theater, 100%, it was great. Mm-hmm. And visuals, it wasn't bad. I mean, they didn't... I think with the lackluster of fight scenes, there was a lot more like Fast and the Furious type stuff where they just had to like pay attention to like the driving camera angles.
Quick cuts with that. So there was never anything that was on screen for too long to where it could look weird.
Mm-hmm. There is something in here with visuals. There's a little bit of a time where there's some de-aging.
Yeah, that's in the trailers.
And what you think about that? As you guys would probably have opinions on, I thought it looked okay. I've seen a lot of de-aging in movies that looked way worse, and I thought this one was it was doable. I thought it looked fine.
What you see in the trailer is pretty much what you get. It's not like they chose the best looking part for the trailer, I would say. It's in the movie a lot more than I thought it was going to be. It's only really one true segment. It's
just like a section. Yeah. It's longer than just like 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's not like a quick little thing, but it's not something that's masturbatory where they keep going back to it. That's the term I used. But I didn't think it was bad. I did think there was a little dip in quality. I don't think they've quite gotten down depth of field with it. So like when something else is what the camera's focused on, like for instance, if Indy is running through a door and he closes the door, the camera stays focused on the door, but you can still see Indy through the glass, and he's not quite in full focus, I should say. It looks really animated then and really weird. Gotcha. So that to me was the thing that stood out. But otherwise, even when it's up close, they do a really good job with the lighting of not making it seem too uncanny valley.
Honestly, just the way the movie ends with the weird, crazy stuff that does end up happening, I thought that was like phenomenal. All looked really good.
Oh, the visuals,
the CGI, all that stuff looked great. I felt like they saved all the big, crazy stuff like that for the end of the movie, because with the lack of fight scenes, they didn't really have to use a whole lot of CGI or stuff like that to enhance the fight scenes because there's not a whole lot. But the end really took all that and put it into one big bang.
Right.
So
another thing, this movie, how do I want to say this? Very dark for a lot of it, but there's good
and depressing.
That too.
There are times where you get a little tear coming out.
Yeah, that is something with the plot that is something that I would say is that there's emotion to this movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, all right, do it again, but with heart. You know what I mean? But visually, I think the movie's pretty dark too. But for the most part, there's scenes obviously in the daytime. That's fine. But when the movie's dark, it's pretty dark.
It's just, again, with darkness, it's hard to tell in a theater because it's pitch black. But on a TV, it might not look good.
Right.
So it's one of those things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought the readability was really well for the dark scenes here. And even so, I'm pretty confident that with some of the light sources used, say, deep down or something, that's just how it works out. It's really well done.
And another upgrade they did with this movie that the other ones did not, when you hear a different language that's not English, it actually subtitles what they say.
I know. That is something. Yeah, they think we can read now. They didn't think we could read before. Yeah, I was just pretending. But otherwise, audio, I thought the soundtrack was pretty good.
That's one thing that I thought the first film especially did really bad. The audio, soundtrack. Because they used
too much of it.
The main theme every 2 minutes.
They were very conservative with it in this movie. I went into it
when they used it.
It was.
I was like, hey,
it was impactful.
Yeah, I was like, okay. And when they used it, it was like in certain scenes when you were getting hyped for Indy to do something, and then it would play, and you're like, oh. But it's not used as much, and that's what I wanted. I want a balance of different things.
Right.
But you're not gonna like watch this movie and then hear like "Take on Me" as they drive through and get away from the bad guy. That's not happening. But I do think the soundtrack was done well.
Yep, I agree. Other than that,
it was a movie.
It was a movie. I had small nitpicks of inconsistency, which I was debating on even bringing up. There's a scene where a bridge breaks, and then they walk back across it a few minutes later, and the bridge is somehow back together.
Yeah, it's just somehow put... Fortnite. We're in an era of Fortnite, so the kid, when he came back, he was just like, crank some 90s real quick.
He rebuilt. He broke the tree for some mats. But
they were outside by trees.
It doesn't matter. That's where he went. That's where he went to get.
He used metal. It's fine.
Yep. Other than that, there was a scene where I noticed that I could tell that... Yes. This is really easy to explain. It's very early in the movie. It's fine.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's not anything
It's still
crazy.
The opening.
It's just, you're talking about the point where they're walking off?
The dub, yeah.
Yeah, and they dub over voice.
So there's a scene, so the Dial of Destiny, the artifact of the movie, or whatever it's actually called, is split into two pieces. And throughout most of the movie, they're trying to get it put together. Well, early in the film, when they first get it, there's a scene where Indy is talking to his compatriot, and he says, the compatriot, whose name I forget, says, "Oh, at least you still have the dial," or something like that. And then Indy, with his back turned, says, he says something, "Well, I only have half of it," or half of it anyway. And then Indy, in the actual scene, he turns around and says, "Come on, let's go." But the diction and the timing in between these two sentences is so
jarring.
Different
it's
and
jarring.
Put together. It's jarring, and it's such a small thing, but you can tell that. I think probably with test audiences, they were like, okay, people think that Indy just has the Dial of Destiny right here, right now, not half of it, and so that was probably a point of contention.
Change.
So they probably just dubbed in that line while he's got his back turned, and they didn't have to reshoot anything, and I could just tell.
Just called it a day.
Yeah, it was just
It's not anything to like make or break the movie, but
yeah, no, it's fine.
As this guy who likes to nitpick every movie ever,
Listen,
I'm just kidding.
I think it was I just thought it was noticeable, and I thought it was something I'd point out to be funny. Sure. If you go and see the movie, let me know if you catch it. It's still early on. Let me see. Anything else? I have some notes, so I'm just going over. Yep. Okay. All right. You want to go ahead and hop into final verdicts?
Yeah, we can do final verdicts now.
Would you like to go first?
Yeah. Okay, that was our general basis, basically, of like the whole movie with little to no spoilers there. And as a person, again, who has never really watched this franchise until like 4 weeks ago, watching these back to back.
Yep.
Again, I never watched the third one, but he kind of summed me up on the third one with the dad of Indy being in it. And, there's Easter eggs in this new movie, by the way, that are referenced from the first and the third.
All of them.
But the second one was definitely the one that kind of kicked under the bridge a little bit.
Yep.
But there's still some references there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was neat for me to be like watching this movie and see all these references or Easter eggs that are from the old ones that I watched like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
It was fun. And I was like, oh man. And I wasn't the only one. Like, you could hear people in the audience be like, oh, this is from this movie, or this person's from this.
You tell people probably like either know the movie so exceptionally well, or they just watched them to catch up.
Yeah. Everyone that was in there definitely was more than likely an Indy fan. They were definitely hyped for it. And I do think that the reviews have been really harsh. Going into this, I thought that this movie was going to be the worst one that I've seen, and I don't think so. But I don't think it's the best one that I've seen either. I think it was a good film with misses and hits, and I do think that the biggest hit was the characters. That wasn't Indy. So like Indy has always been a good character in all the movies. Mm-hmm. The thing that this one did was side characters being really good, and the villain himself and themselves were better, in my opinion. I think that overall, the plot was pretty nice, and I think it ended Indy's arc and whole story in a nice little bow. I think there was a lot of stakes there, and there were certain times where I'm like, is this going to happen to this man? Or is this going to happen to this man?
Yep.
But they did or didn't do what I thought they were going to do.
Right.
And there were a lot of things that I didn't like that they did with it that related to the fourth movie specifically, because of making the fourth movie irrelevant, in my opinion, being one of more... Like, if you hated the fourth movie, you're going to hate it more because it doesn't even matter anymore.
It kicks it walls down.
Yeah, it really does. And it sucks because, hate on me if you will, I thought the fourth movie was pretty good.
Right.
And honestly, for a rate-wise, I'm gonna hit him with a 7. I agree with IMDb with a 7. I think that there were really, really good things in here, and I think it ends his story pretty well. But with the lack of fight scenes, which was one of my favorite parts, that really hurts. And knowing what's going to happen kind of towards the end, in the beginning, or beginning-ish, I was like, there's things that I like about it, but I always loved the, like, being on the edge of my seat, like, what's going to happen with this relic at the end?
Right.
And I'd always be like, whoa. Yeah. So I think that hurts it a little bit, and then just overall, just what it did to the fourth movie. I did that. Yeah. And the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, the fourth movie really just didn't matter.
Because you liked the fourth one.
Yeah, I thought the fourth one was good. So hate me, put me on stakes, burn me, that's fine. But that's what I think. I think this movie's a 7. I think if you enjoy movies, you just want to watch a fun movie, go watch it. Yeah. It's funny. There's a lot of funny moments here. And if you like indie, I think you should definitely give it a chance. You might like it, you might hate it. It depends on what type of indie you're looking for.
I don't think there's any indie fan that's going to hate this movie.
I don't think so either.
I genuinely believe that while I don't think it will ever be your favorite for anyone, I think that every indie fan is going to get something from this movie. Whether it's I don't want to say emotional, because it's not an emotional movie overall, but there's an emotional scenes, and I think it's a pretty good send-off for a character, and respectfully so. It's not like, okay, oh yeah, we're going to go and do this to him in this last movie.
Yeah, it wasn't like kill him in the beginning, pass the torch to this girl character.
Yeah.
Like, if you watch the trailers and you're like, oh, they're just going to pass the torch to her and sideline him to no ends.
The real Indiana Jones is the friend we made along the way.
One thing I will say before he gets into his, there is a kid in this movie.
Yeah.
And the whole time, I'm just waiting for Indy to kind of reference
Short Round.
Short Round. Never came. Yep. I thought it was such a missed opportunity, but I digress.
That's all right.
Yours. As a huge Indy fan over here, let's hear it.
Yeah, I've tried to be as critical and as fair as possible with these movies, and with this movie, in conjunction with the ones that we've seen recently, I think you feel the pacing, not so much the pacing issues, but rather the length of this movie. You feel it. Every bit of it, you feel it, and then it doesn't help when the emphasis on chase scenes as opposed to any other film just wear you down. And I feel like that, if there's anything you could cut easily, cut out a chase scene, probably. Yeah. If
there's so many.
I thought Indy as a character, I like seeing his evolution into the grumpy old man. I enjoyed all of the references throughout the film. It was not so gratuitous that it felt fan servicey, but it was nice enough to where it was just tasteful. I thought Helena's character was far more compelling as a child figure. I don't want to say father-daughter dynamic because that's not what it is, but as opposed to Mutt from Crystal Skull, I feel like this movie does it better.
I agree.
I thought that was cool, and I thought it had more depth to it at the same time. Indy is less of the main character, but he's still the main character. So I thought the balance was actually pretty good, especially given Harrison Ford's condition. Just being older for an action movie.
If you're old, you got a condition. You're just because the condition, the oldness.
But otherwise, villain, loved it.
So good.
I love the supporting cast, the side characters, even the ones I didn't know the names of. I thought
they all had personality.
Right. Yes, they were all distinctive, personality filled. I loved it.
Like the agents, one's trigger happy, Mm-hmm. One's brute force. Mm-hmm. One's more, let's keep it on the hush and, try to...
Yeah.
Like, they all had their distinct features and distinct, way of doing things.
Yes. Set pieces, I thought each of them were pretty well for what they were. I thought there were some beautiful shots in this movie. All things considered, I thought the de-aging was, I was waiting for the shoe to drop of the really ugly scene. It never quite came, but it got eerily close. Outside of that, the length, the repetitive nature of some of the action scenes, and quite frankly, that's really it for me. I mean, otherwise, I thought it was a pretty good movie. Mm-hmm. I thought the devaluing of Crystal Skull was very apparent, but I feel like that hurts Crystal Skull more than it hurts this movie.
Oh, yeah, it definitely does.
So, if anything, it colors that movie in a worse light. But this one, I thought it was just a really good ending to a story. I just wish it was a 2-hour ending to the story, ultimately. And a 2-hour ending to the story that came out 10 years ago. So
it should have been this instead of the fourth movie. If this is how they wanted to end it, it should have been the fourth movie, and that should have been it.
Yeah.
Because the last movie, just the Crystal Skull one, just doesn't hit anymore. I look back on it, I'm like, man, it's not good anymore.
Yeah.
It's still a fun watch, I think, but it's just everything that it builds up to in the fourth one and ends on a happy note and all that, thrown out the window.
But so with that being said, I would probably rate this movie. I'm torn. Actually, I am. Legitimately, I'm trying to fight recency bias as we just saw it. And I want the honeymoon phase.
It's hard, yeah.
I'm torn between a 7.5 and a 7.
So around the same.
I think 7 is the safe, okay, I know it's not worse than a 7. But just the way that it handles everything so tastefully with the fan service. This is the last movie. I think I'm going to lean 7.5.
If they make another movie... This is going down again. This one is not going to be this high anymore.
I think we're pretty safe to say that it's not. But I think that it throws out new characters, all pretty much an entirely new cast outside of a few, and I cared about each of them, except for one example, which I won't spoil. But otherwise, I just thought it handled everything well. I thought comedy-wise, it wasn't as heavy, but
there were scenes.
It leans into Indy being old.
Yeah. But there's scenes in there that, because of him being old,
there's other stuff too.
I'm surprised I didn't hear him scream, "Get off my lawn." Him being old, there are things in there that make it funny. But they're compared to the older ones, especially 2 and 4, wasn't as many of those funny scenes. But they were there. They were there.
That's fair. But yes, I think 7.5 is where I would like to sit.
All right.
I think that's safe, but I'm willing to think maybe 7. I just need to really process it longer. We've only just seen it an hour and a half ago. So, yeah, it is what it is. But, yeah, so that's our somewhat quick thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Definitely should give it a shot.
That's it for us with this franchise. It is what it is. It's sad. But that's one more in the can. We've done Evil Dead.
We've done Scream. All the Happy Death Day movies.
Happy Death Day.
The rest of them are kind of one-offs.
We did Old. I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Freaky,
yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot of one-off stuff.
Yeah, well, we're kind of starting maybe Resident Evil.
Yeah.
We're at least gonna watch the second one.
We got Resident Evil, the first one, already recorded and ready for your watching here soon.
That will be up next week.
So
yes. Anyways, thank you for watching, and go away or something. Dun, dun, dun.